Okay, so this is my second time doing this because someone decided, hey, you're gonna call me and then be a telemarketer and breathe my valuable air. That's wonderful. So, this is Admit Nothing by Angelique Daemon. This is FF9 fanfic, and really it has my favorite characters kind of just existing. It's a nice little thing. I think we're all going to enjoy it. I enjoyed it, and that's why it's here. Also, if you have a fanfic that you want me to read, especially with next month, let me know about it now. It does take me a little bit of time, but if I get something that I really like, I can do it pretty quick. So, and by pretty quick, I mean, 2 weeks. Because I do have to have some back and forth with the authors. So, with that, this is Admit Nothing. Freya frowned slightly as she sliced into yet another stalk of celery. You would think, she said to no one in particular, that since I spent all day every day with a great bloody sharp thing in hand, people wouldn't ask me to wield one in my downtime. But then again, I did volunteer, so it's really my own fault. She finished mowing through the vegetable and picked up the next one, moving it onto her cutting board. Of all the people to be alone during the solstice, she muttered, and shot a slightly saddened look at the weapons rack that had once held a glaive in addition to her spears. It was odd. She was not sad that she had no longer been with Fratley per se. She was sad that the face of the man she had loved with all her heart was on a person she just couldn't know. It did not soften the sting that he seemed to have been incapable of knowing her as well. She shook her head and turned her attention back to the task at hand. No use moping about it. It would not change anything, but if she was not moping, then why had she not gone to the solstice celebration in Alexandria? She had been invited after all, like she had been the last 2 years since the Dane's return. She had gone both times as well. It was just that this year, well, she knew the group. They would all be trying to give her pep talks, each in their own little way, and she just did not want to sit through that, nor did she want to bring anyone else down. So rather than suffer the pity of her friends, she had volunteered to help with the making of the feast for the children's celebration. It was a long-standing Burmesian tradition to have a feast for all of the children in the city on the eve of the solstice. That way, they would be too full of heavy, rich food to stay awake, and parents could work on wrapping and placing gifts while they slept. Normally, it would have been the castle chefs that prepared the feast, but after the city had been destroyed, well, the castle was intact once more, so the feast could be held there, but it was still drastically understaffed, so people volunteered their time to help make the feast possible. Her ears lifted at the sound of a knock at the door. "Pestering me won't make it cook any faster," she muttered as she added the celery into the pan with the sweating onions. "In fact, it will make it take longer." She set her utensils down and grabbed the dish towel so she could wipe her hands. Perhaps one of the children lost something on the roof. Burmesia was a city of eternal rain, but at about the middle of winter, that rain turned to snow, and the city was currently covered in a nice layer of lovely white flakes, which meant it was bleeding cold. As an old warrior, at least as a warrior that had seen a lot of combat, that meant there was no way she was opening that door before she pulled on a jacket, so when the knock, really it was more of a pounding, sounded again, she simply snorted and muttered, "I'm coming." She continued putting on her coat. The kids could have all the damn snow. She wanted a nice hot fire and a warm drink, thanks. She was almost at the door when the pounding came again. "Oh, bloody hell," she said in exasperation, grasping the doorknob and yanking it open. "What do you bleeding want?" She snapped at a broad, green-covered chest. Her head quickly snapped up to look at her visitor. "Amaranth? What are you doing here?" "Freezing." "Move, you damn rat, it's fucking cold." Freya backed up so he could enter, though his name-calling brought a scowl to her face. "I know it's cold," she snapped as she closed the door behind him. "And you freezing is your own damn fault if you're gonna run around in a vest and no coat or cape. Now go sit by the fire and thaw out before you turn even bluer." The monk replied sarcastically, already making a beeline for the roaring heat source. "Did I interrupt your trash can raiding, or did someone drop a house on your tail? Stop being a bitch." She put her hands on her hips, watching the redhead huddle as close to the fire as he could. "You know, you're the one that just barged in unannounced and uninvited. I think it's perfectly reasonable for me to be a bit put out, especially when the first thing you do is start insulting me. He simply shrugged, holding his huge hands out to the fire, nearly blocking out its light entirely. I see Prattley's finally broken you into the little woman role. Figured it'd happen eventually, he said with a snort. Dragon Knight felt scalding anger well up inside her and glared back at her guest. And what, pray tell, makes you think that? You're wearing an apron. I am cooking, Coral. Her ears went back in annoyance. He could tell that she was getting mad because she was starting to go formal. That's the other thing. Yeah. It amused him the way she scowled angrily, but it was more than a little surreal to see her without her helm. If it were not for the bang still covering one eye, she would have been completely alien. You're not in your armor either. Freya reached up and rubbed her face before pushing her bangs back out of her eyes, almost as though she had heard his thoughts. I am not wearing my armor because I am cooking in my own home where there are no monsters. Present company excluded, of course. And I am cooking because it is the night before the children's feast, and I offered to help. She wrinkled her long nose. That's what I mean, you're all domestic. Flapjack finally bore the fighting spirit out of you. He turned his head slightly to look pointedly at the weapons rack. Looks like he's the one out being the Dragon Knight while you're here being the happy homemaker. She could kill him. She could kill him and no one would convict her because he was a horrible wanted criminal and she was a respected royal Dragon Knight. Sir Prattley, she did not stress the name like she would have if she was correcting him, has not affected my fighting spirit in any way, shape, or form, she said primly. I feel sorry for him and the recruits with him that will miss the solstice celebrations, but that is the extent of my feelings on the matter. I am helping with the children's feast because they need extra hands, and King Puck has snuck off to attend the solstice festival in Alexandria, so I have no duties to perform and wish to make myself useful. so another thing right there. Why aren't you celebrating with everyone else? Why aren't you? Because I'm an asshole. His blasé reply knocked the wind from Freya's sails, leaving her nonplussed. Well, no argument here, she managed to mumble in reply, clueless as to how she would respond to that. You knocked up? Too delicate to travel? I most certainly am not. I did not go to Alexandria because I do not wish to. Her ears were laying back in anger now. She snapped, her posture growing straighter, more perfect with every sound. I wanted to spend the solstice quietly, and last time I checked, that was not a crime. Furthermore, Master Coral, what I do and do not do are none of your concern. I will thank you to keep your speculation to yourself. She performed a textbook about face and marched back into the kitchen. I would not wish to keep you from whatever errand you are about, so feel free to take your leave once you've warmed yourself. Happy solstice! Amaranth tilted his head slightly, recognizing that he had perhaps gone too far, though he was more willing to think that she was being oversensitive. Guess I was right. No fighting spirit at all. Freya had managed to reach the kitchen, and had even started to stir the sautéing vegetables when the redhead made his comment. Already so angry she could barely see straight, she reacted without thinking. The cleaver she had used to cut the vegetables was suddenly in her hand, and she threw it as hard as she could at the monk before she even realized what she was doing. Her eyes widened in shock, and her heart stopped beating for a second as the knife made a silver arc in the air, turning end over end as it raced to its target, its trajectory set to embed in the older man's head. And he caught it. Without looking, he simply held up one giant hand and caught the damn thing by the handle as if it was child's play. Relief roared with annoyance at the threat's easy, off-handed nullification. Gonna have to try harder if you want to change my opinion, he said simply as he set the cleaver on the mantel. Any housewife could act like that. The Burmesian's ears went back in anger. If you are trying to get me to fight you, I will not oblige. I am busy and do not have time for your stupid games. She gave the pot a vicious stir. Furthermore, as I am sure you have noticed, it is freezing outside, I have no intention of going out into the cold simply to humor you. Wimp, says the ugly behemoth cuddling up to the fire. The monk smiled, or rather smirked, ever so slightly. I've been traveling through the bitch-ass cold to get here, and you've been making house in a warm kitchen. And you're old. So don't bitch to me about it being freezing out. The Dragon Knight huffed and resolved to simply ignore her guest. He liked silence anyway, so it suit him just fine. She finished sautéing the vegetables and spices, added it to the giant bowl of crumbled cornbread before adding the broth and the eggs. It was not until she transferred the mixture into the huge pan that something the older man said had finally penetrated the fog of her anger. Wait, you were traveling here? I thought you were just passing through. He turned his head to look at her. To where, the ocean? This rat hole's so far out of the way, it's a wonder anyone comes here. She frowned. Who are you here to kill? Alright, that may not have been fair since he had switched over to capturing his bounty heads alive, but she was not feeling particularly happy with him at the moment. The redhead ignored her completely as he pulled a flask out of his vest and took a long pull. It was only after he tucked it away that he flatly said, You. What? Her ears went up again and she nearly dropped the pan she'd been putting in the oven during the long silence. He shrugged, the movement like the rise and fall of mountains. I assumed kill was bitch for visit. She scowled as she shoved the pan in the oven, hissing slightly when her hand hit one of the hot racks. Why are you here, Amaranth? She snapped. You know I always go to Alexandria for the solstice, so why are you here in Bermesia? The older man moved away from the fireplace finally, making his way across the room and into the kitchen. You're not in Alexandria, he pointed out. You are in Bermesia, so I'm here to see you. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, his bulk dominating the room. So, why are you here and not there? Do you really care? He raised a brow, his dreadlock shifting. I don't ask if I don't want to know. She sighed angrily, her temper too frayed to keep up the bickering. Fratley left, and I don't want to be everyone's pity case, alright? I wanted some peace and quiet, and planned to keep myself busy this solstice so I wouldn't mope around like some soppy rat princess in a fairy story. You are a soppy rat princess. That's why you spent so long pining for him. Freya could not stand it anymore. Rather than say anything, she slugged him as hard as she could, hoping she could knock the jerk right out of him, though she doubted that was actually possible. Of course, the punch did nothing to him and merely left her hand hurting. He tilted his head slightly, no change in his posture or expression despite being punched in the jaw. Feel better? No. She growled, cradling her hand to her chest. It had been like hitting a damn boulder. He shrugged. Then you're a lost cause, and too soppy to be helped. She hit him again, and once more he simply took it without giving any sign that it bothered him. And now? She scowled, both hands hurting now. I do not want to be your pity case either. If you are here just because you feel sorry for me, then you can take your surly ass out of my house right now. He snorted. Yeah, because I'm known for pity. A kindly amaranth, they call me. Then why are you here? Because you weren't in Alexandria. Did the others put you up to this? Nope. If they had, don't you think they would have told me about Sir Flibbertigibbet? Freya opened her mouth to yell again and then stopped and frowned. If the others did not send you here, then how did you know I was not in Alexandria? Because I looked. Her brows drew together. Why were you looking for me? Wanted someone to drink with. But if you're going to be all bitchy and mopey, I don't want to put alcohol on you. The Burmesian stared up at the older man, trying to read his face, or rather half of it, the half she could see. You went all the way to Alexandria, then came out here just so you could have a drink with me? She asked, her skepticism clear in her voice. Which is why I was bitching about this place being the ass end of nowhere. As a seasoned warrior, she knew what she had been beaten, and as much as she would love to kick the big blue bastard, She was pretty sure that this was his very backhanded way of saying that he wanted to spend the solstice with a friend, and to be honest, she needed that. She needed a friend around that would distract her as much as Amaranth would. She sighed softly. Well, if you've come this far, just have a drink. Then I suppose I can oblige you. And if you stop being an asshole, I'll even feed you and let you stay here through the solstice. He raised a brow, snorting quietly in amusement. Wasn't planning on going anywhere anyway. Freya smiled slightly. Most people whine about their homes being infested by rats. Mine's infested by a behemoth. Amaranth tilted his head. Doesn't there have to be more than one for it to be an infestation? A big bloody bastard like you can infest a place all by yourself, she informed him with a smile. Yeah, fair enough, he conceded, smirking ever so slightly. So, that was Admit Nothing by Angelique Daemon. If you enjoyed, hit the links, make the author happy. You know, I enjoy Freya Amaranth fanfiction just because I like the dichotomy, and I like how just the differences can be shown. It makes me just all warm and fuzzy in the parts I probably should have, but don't. Anyway, if you enjoyed it, let me know. Thank you for listening. Have a good one. Ta-ta for now.